Hello everyone, my name is Michael. In today's video, I'm going to show you how we can use Cryptomus API in our Node.js application to start accepting cryptocurrency payments in our platform. So the great thing about Cryptomus is, first of all, they offer really competitive commission rates, which start at 0.4%. And another personal favorite of mine is, first of all, they support multiple networks and some of the networks that are rarely supported from other competitors. For example, they support TRC20, which platforms like Coinbase don't support, and it's something that I had trouble with because many of my clients wanted to use TRC20 to make payments in my platform, but they couldn't basically because I didn't support it. And another thing that I really liked is that, first of all, besides one-time payments, they also support doing subscriptions. And that's something that is missing from many other competitors. Now, the next great thing is they also support doing payouts using their API. And there are multiple usage for this. And one of them is that instead of only making a payout into your personal wallet, for example, you would want to make payouts to your platform users automatically if, for example, they make money through your platform or they want to withdraw money from your platform, you could support that. And again, that's something that you can rarely see in any other competitors. And this is why Cryptomus is sponsoring this video. So yeah, without further ado, let's get straight into it. So before we start coding, I would like to show you an example of how it will work as a finished product. So as you will see, I'll be using Postman, and I have created an endpoint /checkout, and I will be sending the amount I want to charge my user and the currency that amount should be in. Now have in mind, it doesn't matter what currency you use because either way, they will be paying in Bitcoin, but this is what it will be showing in the checkout page. So for example, in the checkout page, I will see the amount and the currency, but of course, they will be paying with crypto. So let's click send. And as you will see, what we will get is a few information about the payment that we are charging, for example, the amount, the order ID, and some other information. But what we are looking for is the URL. So if we visit the URL, this is basically the checkout that the user will see. So when you create your platform, what you will want to do is after you send a request to Cryptomus API, you will get the URL, and then you want to redirect your user to that URL. And then what the user can do is select their currency. For example, we want to do USDT, and then the network they want to pay with. For example, they can be Tron, Ethereum, Polygon, etc. And again, this is what I like the most about this platform, is that they support multiple networks and not only one or two networks. And then they can click pay. And as you see, this platform also offers cashback, so that's an extra. And then what the user will do is scan their QR code or basically copy the address here and send the payment. And once they make a successful payment, we have set up a webhook where we can receive the status of that payment, if it's paid, cancelled, or something else. Okay, so the first thing to do is sign up, and I'll have the link down in the description. And you can easily sign up with Google, for example. Then after you sign up, it will ask you to download Authenticator app, which is the Google Authenticator app. And this is basically for added security. So let's go ahead and do that. And there we go. Now the next step is to create a merchant account. So to do that, as you'll see, we'll just follow the step-by-step tutorial. So let's do that. Let's enter our merchant account. So for example, let's leave it at test. and then create merchant account. Then, as it says, congratulations. Now all that is left is to set up the API integration. So let's click go to setup. Now the next step is to get our API key. And to do that, first we have to specify if we are integrating this API into our website or into our Telegram bot. So I'll be choosing website. And then here on the description, you can just leave a description about your website and what it is about, and then click submit. Next, it will ask you to verify your domain. So you can either verify it using DNS, a meta tag on your website, or download an HTML file. Or if you had chosen the Telegram bot, you'll have to verify that your Telegram bot ownership. Now I had done this already in another account, so after you do that and you submit your request, it will ask you to wait maximum of 12 hours and then your application will most likely be accepted. So after your application is accepted, you will be able to see here status active, the URL of your project, the project name, and then the two things we will need, which is the merchant ID and then the payment API key, which you can change if you want to. So before we start coding, I would like to go quickly through the settings and tell you about what each one does. So first of all, if you go to payment accuracy, this is in case the price, for example, if the user paid with Bitcoin, if the price of Bitcoin fluctuates, you will not get exactly the amount that you want to charge the user. For example, you instead of $5, you'll get $4.70 or $4.60. So most likely, if you want to accept it, if the price of Bitcoin, for example, drops, then you can increase this to maximum of 5%. So maximum, you would accept a payment to be 5% less, because from the time that the user makes the payment to the time that the payment is accepted, it could take several minutes depending on the amount. So most likely you would want to change this payment accuracy so you can accept payments even if they are a few cents below the actual amount that you want to get. Now the next thing is exchange rate. So what exchange rate you would like to use for each cryptocurrency. For example, if you want to get the exchange rate from Binance for Bitcoin, then you can use that. Now next, on coins, you can select which coins you would like to accept. And as you'll see, they have a lot of options. And as you'll see, for each coin, there is also the network for it. So for example, you can accept USDT, but only in Tron network. And yeah, that's great. And also, as you'll see, you can add a discount or increase the commission for each coin. For example, what you can say is, okay, I charge $5, but if they pay me with Bitcoin, I want to charge 10% more or 10% less. So you can also do that, which is great. Then we have Shopify integration, which we will not go through. And then the next best, and then finally, the best thing about this is that you can brand the checkout page as you like. So for example, we can set up a logo for the checkout page. So we can replace this logo right here. And also have a store name, so we can replace the name right here with our platform. Now the great thing about Cryptomus is that you can easily sell the cryptocurrency that you receive, and they have something called P2P trading. And if we go here, trade now, as you'll see, they have a separate page which requires KYC verification. But after you do the verification, what you can do is once you get paid in any cryptocurrency, you can easily then sell that crypto so you can receive actual money. So if on your platform you still want to receive actual money and not cryptocurrency, but you want to enable users to use crypto to pay you, then what you can do is have cryptocurrency as a payment method, and then quickly make that cryptocurrency fiat money. Okay, so let's start coding. So first of all, let's go here, create a new folder, and let's name it Cryptomus. Then let's open it in Visual Studio Code. And what we want to do is, first of all, create the package.json, and then we want to install certain packages. So first of all, as we said, this will be a Node.js server. So we will be using Express to create the server. Then to make the requests, we will be using Axios. And then to validate the request, which I will explain a bit how we do that and why we do that, we will be using the crypto package. So let's do that, and that's a save. Now let's create an index.js file, and let's import what we are using. So first of all, let's import Axios. Then let's import crypto, and finally let's require Express. And then we'll create a simple server. So let's define app and then run Express. And then we want to do app.listen, and then we can define a port, for example, 3000. And let's also have a callback so you make sure it's working fine. So once the server runs, we'll do server running. And that's it. Now the next thing we want our API to do is be able to parse JSON. So to do that, we will do app.use and then express the JSON. Okay, so first of all, let's define our merchant ID and also define our API key. So if we go back, what we want to do now is copy paste our merchant ID to this value here. And also copy paste our API key by clicking copy right here. And don't worry, I'll be regenerating my API key at the end. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is visit the Cryptomus API documentation for creating an invoice for one-time payments. So I'll have the link again down in the description for this. And as you will see, what the API expects from us is to send a post request to this API endpoint. So api.cryptomus.com version 1/payment. Now the first parameter we have to send is the amount, and have in mind the amount has to be in fiat money and not cryptocurrency money. So here, for example, you'll be saying 10 and then on currency USD and not 10 Bitcoin, okay? So have in mind this will be in fiat money. Then after defining amount and the currency you want to use, then you want to define order ID. Now as you will see here, the order ID is supposed to be the order ID in your system. So when for example in a real application you are creating a checkout, you would also want to save that on the database. So for example, you could use the database ID here. And then once we create the webhooks, which I'll explain in a bit why we use them and how we use them, then you can get that order ID on the webhooks and match it to the payment on your database. Now there are other parameters you can pass, but they are not mandatory. So for example, if you want to only accept TRC20, then you can define it here. But as I showed you before, you don't have to do that if you have set up on your application which coins to accept. So if you had done that, then you don't have to do it again. Then you can define the URL return. So for example, if the user doesn't want to pay and they click exit, then you want the user to be redirected back to your application on a certain URL. The same goes for success. If the payment was successful, where do we redirect the user? If we redirect the user anywhere. And then the most important, which I will show you again in webhooks, is the URL callback. So here we define the URL of our webhook, and there are some other parameters which you can check, but they are not as important. So before we start coding, what we have to do is click getting started and then go to request format. And as you will see, when we send a request, besides the merchant ID that we have to send, we also have to send a sign. And basically, this sign ID is how we sign our request. So Cryptomus knows the request is coming from you and is legitimate. Okay, so let's go back and create our first endpoint. So let's do app.post and then let's name it checkout. Then we want to get the request and the response. There we go. And now the first thing I want my endpoint to contain is the amount and the currency. So it's the const amount and then currency. And let's get this from the body. Now the next thing we want to do is create an object called data, and here pass the data that we want to send on the API. And as you see, we want to send the amount. So let's copy that. Then we want to send the currency. And then finally, the order ID. Now the order ID, as I said, will be something that you will save in a real world application on your database. So you can match it later on when we set up webhooks. So you will be able to update the status of that payment. But for now, we will just generate a random order ID. So because this is mandatory. So yeah, to do that, we can use crypto and then say random bytes. And then we can do 12. And then after creating the random bytes, we want to translate that into a string and specifically a hex string. Now the next thing we want to do is send the actual request. So what we will do is say const response. And we also want to make this asynchronous, so we'll do a since here. And then say await Axios and then make a post request. And then we want to pass the URL. So let's go here, copy it. And then we paste the URL here and the data here. And that's all we have to do. And the next step is to send what we receive from that request back to front end, or in our case on Postman, so we can read the data. And then the next step, since we want to read the data from Postman, is to do res.send and then send response.data. But if you are using a front-end application, you'll want to just send the URL that we receive from that data. So actually we want to do response.data.result.url, and then after you get that URL in your front end, to redirect your user to that URL. But for now we will return everything so we can see what we get. But we are not done yet. We have to pass some certain headers. So first of all, let's define headers here. So let's say headers. And inside our headers, first of all, we want to send the merchant ID like so. So as you see right here, on the request format, it expects for a merchant. So we pass our merchant ID. And then next, as you see right here, it expects a sign, which is an MD5 hash of the body of the post request encoded in base64 and combined with your API key. Now, I know if you're a beginner, this might seem strange or you don't know what that is, but if you don't understand what an MD hash is or whatever this is, just follow along and copy paste. This will be the exact same thing in your end as well. So to create the sign, what we will do here is const, then sign, and then this will be crypto. Then we will create a hash, and as we said, it will be an MD5 hash. Then we will update this hash, and as we said right here, it expects encoded in base64. So let's go ahead and do that. So first of all, we'll do buffer dot from. Then we will stringify the data here. So JSON.stringify, and then we pass the data. And then from the buffer, we want to get the dot to string and translate that to base64. And then finally, as it says right here, combine with your API key. So what we will do is say plus API key. Now again, you can just copy paste this and it will work the same for you. But just make sure here you specify your API key, and here you pass the data, the exact data that you are sending to Cryptomus API. So finally, what we'll do here is pass sign, and that's it. Unknown coding base. Oh, right. So we have to do here base64. All we have to do is this, and then pass hex. There we go, as we want it on a hex format, like we did the order ID here. So let's run our application, our server, create a new request, make sure it is post. And if you don't have Postman already, you can download it, or if you're using any other application to test your endpoints, go ahead and use them. So we'll put localhost. Now I use port 8080, so I'll use that, and then /checkout. And then what we want to do is go back, go to the body, raw, and make sure we send JSON. And what we want to send, first of all, is the amount. And have in mind, it expects to be string, not a number. So make sure you do 5 or in a string and not as a number, or whatever amount you want. And then we can define the currency. And for example, I can say USD. So let's go ahead and test this out. And there we go. As you see, we got some data. So as you see, we are getting the UUID of the request. You might want to save this on your database in your real world application as well. Then we get the order ID that we created, the amount, and there are some other useful parameters which we don't want to check right now. But what we want to focus is on the URL and maybe the expired at. So as you see right here, you can see when this is expiring, but you can also define a custom period of time before your checkout page expires. So yeah, let's go ahead and click this URL. And that's it. The checkout page, as you see, is created with the amount we defined. So now the user can click the currency they want to pay with and pay it. But we are not done just yet. Now the next thing we have to do is create an endpoint to receive the webhook requests. And if you don't already know what a webhook is, let's simplify it. So for example, when the user makes the payment and we receive the payment, in your application, for example, you might want to mark an item as paid, or basically if the user wants to add balance to your platform, then you would update your balance. But how would you know if the payment was successful? You would not want to do that manually. So what you will do is create another endpoint like the checkout we did right here, but instead we can call it /webhook or /callback or whatever. And then we tell the Cryptomus API, okay, whenever the status of this payment changes, I want you to send me the new data. And the new data will contain the status of the payment, and some other useful information that you will want to use in your real world application. Now, if you still are not completely sure what a webhook is, let's start coding and you will understand it in the process. So let's go back in VS Code and create a new endpoint, and let's call it /callback. And then, as we did above, we want to make this asynchronous and then get the request and response. And let's leave it at that for now. So now if we go back on the documentation and we scroll down, as you will see, there is another parameter we can pass on our /payment endpoint, and it is the URL callback. And as you see right here, it is the URL to which webhooks with payment status will be sent. Now, of course, in order for Cryptomus to be able to send us a request, we cannot define a localhost URL. So either you'll want to first of all upload your code somewhere online and get your API URL, or what we can do to test it locally is use ngrok. So ngrok, if we visit ngrok.com, as you will see, it allows us to make our localhost public and basically get a public URL which anyone can visit. And basically what that will do is redirect the requests from the public URL to your localhost URL. So go ahead and sign up for ngrok and then download it. And after you download it, you have a file like this one right here. So what you can do is drag it on your terminal and then space and then do HTTP, and then here we pass the port of your API, so it will be 8080. Then once we click enter, as you will see, the ngrok, and it is free to use, generates a URL right here which we can copy, and then using this URL, for example, if we go back on Postman, instead of using HTTP localhost 8080, we can use that URL and it will be the same thing. So as you see right here, if we click send, it works just the same. So again, this URL will redirect any HTTP request on our localhost URL. So as you see right here, it is forwarding from this URL the request to this URL. So next we want to pass the parameters. So as we said, URL underscore callback. And here we will copy paste the ngrok URL and then slash, and then the endpoint for our webhooks, which is /callback. So now the next step you want to do is validate that webhook, because if you don't validate the webhook and make sure the webhook comes from Cryptomus, what that will do is make a vulnerability in your API, and then users can just send false data on this API here that they made the payment when they actually didn't make the payment. So you always want to validate that the requests are coming from Cryptomus. So if we go back and then go right here on webhook, as you'll see here, it tells you what data you are getting from the webhook, which we will check in a bit. But if we scroll down, as you'll see, we will go on webhook verification, and it tells you to do it with two ways. First of all, you can whitelist this endpoint to only allow requests from a certain API, from a certain IP address. But I will not be doing this for this video. What I'll be doing is to verify the signature. But actually much safer is to do both. So you can do both IP address whitelist and then also verify the signature. So basically by verifying the signature, the signature is the same signature we send right here. So it's the same thing. Now, instead of sending the signature, we are receiving the signature from Cryptomus. So what we will do here is say const, and since we are receiving the sign, we will get it from the body, because as you see right here, on response parameters, it is something that we get from the body, as you see right here, the signature. So we'll get the signature and then say request body. Now, first of all, we want to check if we are getting any signature at all. So if we are not, then we want to return a response with a status of 400 and say invalid payload. Now you can say whatever, or you can return whatever status you want besides 200. So never return a status of 200 if the webhook is not validated. Now, in order to do the validation of the sign, we want to be able to get the request.body but as unparsed JSON. Now, if you don't understand what that is and why we need that, you don't have to, you can just follow along, because this is a bit more advanced. So if you're a beginner, you might not understand the usage of it, but if you just copy paste what I'm doing, you will be able to follow along. So what we will do is pass some options here, and the one option we want to pass is verify. From verify, we want to get the request, the response, and the buffer, which is what we need. And then what we want to do is, for every URL, is besides the request.body, to create another value, a custom value called raw body, or you can name it whatever you want. And then we can make that equal to buff.toString. Now the next thing we want to do is delete the sign from the body, because as you will see here on the documentation, this is what it does in PHP as well. So first of all, we want to extract the sign from the data. So to do that, we will do const data, and then we want to json.parse the raw body. So we'll do rec.rawBody. And then what we'll do is delete data.sign. This is required again to validate the webhook. And now the next step is, as we did right here, is to create a sign. And then what we will be doing is compare the sign we created with this sign right here. But because they are sharing the same name, we'll just rename it to hash. And then the final step to validate the webhook is say if, and then say hash doesn't match sign, then we throw an error. Otherwise, the webhook is validated. So we'll still return rest.status, again 400, and then say send invalid sign. And that's it. Now the webhook is validated. So everything below that is after the webhook is validated. So now what we will simply do is console.log, and then we will just log the body, basically the data we get from the webhook. And then finally what we will do is rest.status 200, or basically what we can do actually is send status 200. And make sure to always do 200 if everything went alright, so Cryptomus don't have to resend you that request, because if they resend you that request, then depends on how you set up your system, you might deal with double payments, which you don't want to. So make sure you always respond with a status of 200 if everything goes alright. Now, normally after you get the data from the webhook, you will be doing certain tasks like saving them on your database or updating certain information on your user like their balance or something like that. But for now, we will simply, for simplicity's sake, we will just console.log the data and we will start by testing our payments. Copy the nrock URL, go to Postman. I'll update the amount to $1 because I don't want to test with a big amount, because for testing payments with almost any payment provider which supports cryptocurrencies, you have to use actual crypto and there is no sandbox mode or something like that. Okay, so let's click send and generate our checkout page, and then scroll down and visit that checkout page. Then I'll select Bitcoin because this is what I have and click pay. Then what I'll do now is visit my wallet and scan the QR code, and then I'll just type the amount, so 0.000 and then 3579 and continue. And I'm not sure if you are seeing this, but I'll just click send. There we go. And it is sending the payment, and payment was sent. And that's it. Now it takes a few minutes to validate the payment because, as you know, with cryptocurrencies, the payment is not validated immediately. So for small amounts like $1, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes, so we will wait that. Once the request is validated, we should be getting the request.body that we console.logged here from the webhooks. So let's wait and see. Okay, so first from the webhook, as you see, we get this data, and as you see on the status, we get confirm check. And if we go back on webhook and translate that, actually, can we translate that? Okay, just confirm check. And this is because it is on the confirmation stage, but it is not yet paid. So it is confirmed, or it is being confirmed, but it is not yet paid. But as you can see several information like the order ID, the amount, the payment amount that basically you get on the cryptocurrency. So this is the Bitcoin amount, then the merchant amount. So I think this is how much we are left off after the commission. Yeah, that's right. And yeah, I think that's it. Also, you can see here the payer currency, so what they selected and the network they selected. And yeah, that's it. And there it goes. So as you see, we just got the final status, and as you see, the status is paid. And again, we get the same information here. And as you see before, on the payment amount USD, you get 0, but once it is paid, you get the actual amount. So what you can do is, first of all, check if it is final, and then what you can do is update basically your database with this amount. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you very much, Cryptomus, for sponsoring this video. And let me know down in the comments if you have any questions, and I'll be glad to help you out. And of course, if you like this video, like it, subscribe to see more of this content, and see you in a bit.